Okay, so good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm trying to see if I can see ladies. How exciting is it to be around so many talented and inspiring people? First of all, I do want to give Chainlink their flowers, so thank you so much for putting together this event and giving us the opportunity to be here today and to connect with you. My name is Iris, and I'm a technical program manager for Consensus, more specifically for the Decentralized Infrastructure Network project. And today here with me, I'm joined by Chris, who is our VP of Engineering, and with just 20 years of experience, he is gracefully leading our engineering team into the developer and developer tooling space in Web3. So for the next about 25 minutes, we will deep dive into the core concepts of Web3, the challenges and the opportunities that it presents, and we will talk a bit more about the Decentralized Infrastructure Network initiative that we're doing here at Consensus and kind of how it fits into the picture of all of this. And also, I'm just going to share with you kind of what the progress is on this so far and how far along are we into getting to the vision that we're trying to achieve. But first, is the clicker not working?
You have to this one.
Of course, I was pressing the wrong button. All right, so first, a thing that I do in all my meetings is I do like to start them with a dad joke. So I do want to keep the tradition alive with you today here. So, did you hear about the vampire who got into crypto? He got slashed when he tried staking. Cool. So, yeah, the goal is to get you to cringe, not to laugh. So I did my job. All right, cool. So anyway, let's get to some serious business. So, Chris, I know we've been talking recently a lot about just in general the Web3 principles and kind of how they apply to our mission and to our vision. So I think it might be opportune maybe to share some of your thoughts with the audience, and I'll just send it over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Iris. So really, what is Web3, right? How do we define Web3? Over the next few minutes, I'm going to talk about how we define Web3, concepts of centralization and decentralization, and how it affects the infrastructure community. So if I were to ask everybody in this room, how do you define Web3? I think it would be a bit tricky, right? I think everybody would give a slightly different answer, all sort of like trending in the same direction, right? Is it blockchain? Is it decentralized technologies? Is it privacy? I think the answer is yes and to a lot of these directions. Today we're going to take a bit of a different approach and really define it as a shared culture. It's really a vibe that all of us share and what we're trying to build into our projects, right? It's about inclusiveness. It's about equity. It's about we're really building digital sovereignty for users, for the rest of the world. We're enabling new ways to connect and transact with one another that doesn't require a trusted third party. We're enabling new economies, new models, like new ways of distributing value that's more equitable. And we're really building, like, helping each other build on top of protocols and enabling each other to both have visibility over what the rules are and help shape the rules for a more equitable and inclusive present and future, right? It's kind of a really large picture definition of Web3. And one of the things that I really didn't mention here is like the role of decentralization, right? So decentralization is how we reduce trust, like the trust on a specific third party, right? And decentralization, I don't think, is a specific definition, right? Decentralization is really a spectrum across three independent axes, right? There's a technical aspect, economic aspect, and a legal aspect. And really what we mean by legal is governance. And so on the screen here, you see sort of the legacy infrastructure, the legacy ways that companies have created value, right? On the technical side, it's like closed source and patent farming and things like this. On the economic side, it's traditional VC funding, seed funding, closed sources of investment. And on the governance side, you have closed room corporate boards that are dictating the course and direction of the project or the company, right? Now, as we move right across the decentralized spectrum, you start to open up more visibility, more access, and more collaboration. On the technical side, you go from closed source to open source. You can further that by offering bounties, incentivizing people to help collaborate on your projects. You can open that up further and have the community really help shape your roadmap and where the protocol or the project is going. On the economic side, of course, you have tokens, token distributions. You can offer grants to help develop your protocol, and liquidity opportunities. And on the governance, of course, there are things like DAOs, opening up participation and opening up the governance. Now, across these three independent axes, you see probably things that everybody in this room is familiar with. How these different axes of decentralization interplay with each other, right? Whether it's community testing, partnerships with building on protocols, DAOs, LPs, and the like. Now, every company that starts in Web3 is starting somewhere along this spectrum, right? Some companies start closer to the left-hand side, traditional venture capitalism, closed companies, and some go all the way to the right side, DAO first, open protocol first, fully decentralized. But it is a spectrum. And for early projects that are trying to get off the ground, our argument is that it's a bit safer to pull it a little bit more centralized with a clear roadmap of decentralization, but you're really de-risking it, right? By having a more centralized fashion, you can have things like maintain high bars of quality for your technical implementation, consistent lines of funding to make sure the project can sustain itself, and strong opinions on where the project is going initially, so that you can get a clear direction on the product before opening it up toward a larger decentralized audience. And so really what we're talking about is this area of federation, right? Federation doesn't necessarily mean centralized, it doesn't mean decentralized, but it is in this space of varying levels of decentralization along these axes. And I think this is an important consideration when starting new projects because it puts you on solid footing to be able to progressively decentralize, right? And so really the point of federation is to start in a safe place where you know you have good stability with a clear roadmap for decentralizing in the future. Now, we'll talk about points of centralization in Web3, right? And here are some examples of where things tend to centralize. The first picture on the left here really represents value, sort of the old adage of follow the money, right? Well, you can start to ask questions like, what is the goal of this company or what is the goal of this project? Where is value getting created? Where is value getting extracted? And the point of sort of like what old traditional business models is maximize shareholder value, extract as much as you can from the value chain. Or, more decentralized, are we creating more equitable flows of value where people can participate? On the technical side, we have things like GitHub. Now, I'm not picking on GitHub. I don't think they're an evil, centralized company, but all of our projects are generally hosted on GitHub. This is how we share information, how we participate and contribute code to each other. If GitHub's down, that's when the tech sector comes to a grinding halt, right? People are having problems with GitHub. You can't access information. You can't contribute. And lastly, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Why is somebody in Fura talking about the evils of centralization, right? And we'll get to JSON RPC and what we do in just a second, but think about the wider picture. What cloud providers are we all running nodes in? Are we running our projects in? Wider than that, what regions are the data centers in? And something that's not particularly related to data centers, but something that's on top of mind for the industry, you could ask yourself questions like, which projects have a dangerously large percentage of the validator set, right? The point is that centralization is an organic evolving force within our industry, and it really is our job to be able to spot and create mechanisms to reduce that. So before I kick into the JSON RPC section, I've done a lot of talking about Web3 ethos and decentralization, centralization, and really there's 3 points that I want you to pull out of that. One, that decentralization is a spectrum across 3 independent axes. 2, centralization isn't necessarily an evil thing, but requires more modes of trust in order to participate. And third, sorry, excuse me. And third is really about this idea of federation, of playing this game of like where to centralize and where to decentralize that really puts us in the best place to succeed. Now let's talk about RPC. So RPC is a commodity business. How we think about it is that there's low barriers of entry. There's not much gating. We implement a standard JSON RPC interface. And that's on purpose, right? Since Infura started, the whole ethos has been, if you want to run your own node, great, you do that. If you want a backup or you don't want to go through the pain of trying to keep a node online, you can use us. And so there's really no switching costs between the providers. And as the competitive space has grown in this industry, it really becomes commodity, right? What's the difference between Infura and any of the competitors? Well, the answer is not much. It's really, the value prop becomes how low can you drop the price, which is great for the consumers and people that use the service, but it's really a vector for centralization. Because think about it, if you're a commodity business, the only way to succeed is to consolidate the market. And so you consolidate part of the market, you get economies of scale, you drop your price. You get more of the market, more economies of scale, you drop your price. And so at the end of the day, the most successful version of this business model is centralization. That one entity controls the vast majority of the market. And so where does this stand with all the things that I've said with Web3 ethos and decentralization? Well, it's really, the issue with centralization, especially with node providers, is about availability, right? And availability can come in many forms. If Infura goes down, whether that's for technical reasons, regulatory reasons, or just plain provider limitations, that affects each and everybody's project, right? It's centralized. The business model makes it such that it's a force of centralization, right? And it's not collaborative by nature. We're all competing with each other, essentially building the same stacks, the same architectures, but in our own silos. And so for something that's so key to the success of the industry and for this access that you need to the network, it's something where it should be a more collaborative building block. So given all of this talk about centralization, Iris, where do you think we need to go for the infrastructure provider community?
Yep, sure. Cool. So just for my own peace of mind, I'm going to assume that people know what Infura is and what it does. Okay, I can see some nods. Okay, cool. So for the last 7 years, what Infura has been doing is basically providing RPC as a service, but through a very traditional mechanism that we're all familiar with, which is giving tools to developers, SaaS, essentially. And I'm just kind of going to give you the context of where the idea of us trying to decentralize this came from. But over the last few years, we really felt like it became a challenge to keep up with the amount of new networks that were being added, and at the same time, the way developers were interacting with us as a service was changing. So, at one point, people were running their own infrastructure, and maybe they were doing a combination of splitting their traffic and routing some of it through us and some of it from their own infrastructure. And, that's cool, but things evolve, and then people decided that, oh, okay, I don't actually want to put up with the pain and the effort to run my own infrastructure. Well, I can just rely solely on a third-party provider to take care of that. So back in 2016, Infura was pretty much like, the lead market shareholder on anything RPC related. But as time grew and, as the interest grew, we saw that a whole sort of ecosystem kind of popped up of just a bunch of different RPC providers that were all serving, the same networks, were kind of giving the same end user experience. So our goal has always been and will continue to be to offer developers access to production-ready and very reliable Web3 infrastructure. Now, achieving 100% uptime is realistically impossible to do like by itself in a single provider, but by getting a network of different providers working together, this is something that sounds a lot more achievable, and this is kind of the direction that we're trying to go to. So, to go back to the initial question, where should the infrastructure provider community go towards? It's definitely towards decentralization, but we need to do it in a realistic manner. So it's not like, one day I can just like switch over and I'm like, okay, now we're decentralized and it's working. So this clicker really hates me, by the way, because I've been pressing this for like the last 2 minutes. All right, cool. So what is DIN? And I think you might have heard the acronym. DIN stands for Decentralized Infrastructure Network. So this is one of the initiatives that we're trying to lead here at Infura, where we're basically trying to decentralize our offering. So the easiest way to think about DIN is probably think about it as decentralized RPC as a service. So our approach to decentralizing RPC is basically creating a system or a network of providers that allows them to generate revenue while also keeping the user experience for the customer basically the same as just using a regular provider. So, here's an endpoint, it's always gonna be on, you can connect to different blockchains, and everything looks the same from your perspective, but in the background, instead of having one single provider serving you that traffic, you're going to have a network of a bunch of providers doing this for you. So there's a lot of things around here, and Chris touched on a few of those, but we do believe that there's a very fine balance between opportunity of commoditizing the RPC layer, so having different providers kind of competing for price or for, different quality of service, because you have a plethora of customers. Not every customer is going to want to pay a bunch of money to, get the request. Some don't care if the data is so reliable, or they don't care so much about the latency just due to the nature of their projects. So by opening up the space and having, more capabilities and more opportunities and more different like tiers of offering, you're basically tapping even into, like speciality or craft RPC, where some people like really care about latency or geography, and you do actually have the potential to offer those, but you're not limiting yourself to that, but rather opening it up to a different variety of customers. Cool, so that's kind of it in a nutshell. I'm just going to quickly walk you through the different roles that would be in this federation, and then we're going to have a quick look at a high-level overview of the architecture. So this is very simplified and toned down, but ideally we're going to have 3 different types of participants in this initially federated network. So you're going to have an ingress node. So this is one or more agents who basically would accept the payment from the customer, which is the end user, and then they would take the responsibility of finding the optimal way to route that traffic so that it gets served. Then you'd have a node provider, which is right now we're basically in the federated state. We pretty much have just node providers, but this is a reliable actor who can handle high throughput traffic, and it's basically your RPC like provider that Infura is. And finally, we would also have a watcher, because we need to make sure that things are running smoothly, that the quality of service stays the same, and the user experience is basically not degraded by potentially malicious actors that might join the federation. Cool. So this looks big and scary. I promise you it's not. If we look at it based on colors, these are kind of the main actors that I talked about. So purple is the ingress. We've got blue for the node operators, which we see here could be Infura. And we also have the network watchers as well. And this kind of just shows you on a high level what the flow of the whole operation would be and where the federation would come in. And you can clearly see that, you have different options. You have like one point where the user request goes out, but then you have many, many options where you could route it to depending on what the user needs or what it wants, whether it's price, latency, quality of service. We should be able to service it. Cool. So again, as I said before, I'm not just going to try to say that we're fully decentralized at this point, because we're truly not, but we are trying to do this in the right way. And again, I think Chris mentioned earlier that you don't really want to start like too far in the right side of the spectrum, which is like either fully centralized or decentralized. But we're trying to get there. But the first step is let's do a federation first. Let's see how things are going. We basically will route requests to our federated network that is comprised of different providers who have different capabilities. And once we prove that this works, and the main task at hand that we're trying to prove is actually that consumers would actually use this and they would find value in it. And once that's done, we will continue to iterate on this and progressively decentralize it. And we will reach a state where ideally anyone can join this regardless of their capabilities. You're a node provider, you're like, okay, actually this sounds cool, I want to participate. We can just kind of go through the onboarding process with you, and you can kind of just join the network. So speaking of node operators, this is kind of what we've been doing with a bunch of partners that we currently have in the federation in the last half a year. And this is, again, just very high level. There's no timelines on it, because right now it's kind of on a case-by-case basis. But as a node operator, you're probably looking at initially going through an onboarding stage where you're going to meet up with a few of the members of the Dean team. We're going to give you an overview a bit more in detail than what I kind of gave you here right now about what we do, what your requirements would be from your side and your responsibilities would be. Then if all of this goes well, because we're still in a federated state, there would be like an MNDA and a few other documents that would need to be signed that would take us into a testing phase. So when I'm saying testing, I feel like that's quite a harsh term, so maybe it might be better to say benchmarking, but we're basically trying to figure out what you can do, what you can handle. And there's no right or wrong, because you can have like smaller RPC providers, they can handle like 1K RPS. You can have some that can handle, 10, 20K, and that's totally fine, but it's more of us understanding where your capabilities are and what we can do, and what we're working with, basically. And then you'd go into, everyone's favorite part, the legal stuff, which is, signing like the actual contracts and the pricing and all of that. And then you'd go into a sort of leveled approach to kind of trying out to integrate yourself into the federated network. So initially you'd receive failover traffic from other partners. Then we'd go into optimized traffic from partners. And I do call optimized traffic basically traffic that you're running your infrastructure, and at some point you might have a spike in traffic. Let's say you don't actually need to scale up your resources, but you could just route the extra traffic. So you're always maintaining a baseline, but you're just sending the extra to a partner, and it's a win-win situation for everyone. And then finally, these are like the first sort of baby steps, but if this works, then you can go into the actual good stuff, which is inter-partner traffic, which is like, I support a network that you don't, but I can route you the traffic from my customers for the network I don't support for you, and then I kind of get to support it as well in a way. So 15 seconds left. I'm not really gonna have time to talk about this too much, but this is kind of just a high level of the acceptance criteria that we have at the moment for joining the network, and this was put together literally like revised, because this is version 2, 2 weeks ago in New York. We had a partner with all the current, we had a meetup with all the partners that are currently part of the federation. And yeah, it's all aligned to kind of support the network in a federated state. So you've got the availability of methods, making sure that, because we're federated, in case you do need to fail over to someone, you want to make sure that they're actually supporting the methods that you're trying to fail over for. We've got latency. The less, the better. I think no further explanation needed. Consistency. So here we're basically making sure that your own nodes are consistent between themselves so that you can give us like good responses back. The max gas cap. This is just supporting ETH calls at a certain threshold above the EVM block gas limit. Sensible error response. Again, this is just to preserve the user experience. So that's if you get a response routed through one person or another, you're going to get the same experience back. And correctness this is just like a very basic level of correctness with the block number monotonicity, but we're just making sure that the next block number that we're getting is at least greater or equal to the previous one that we had. And what's next for us? For us is then it's basically continuing to iterate on this, onboarding more partners, iterating over the acceptance criteria, making sure that the process is as seamless as it can get. And we're hoping to start inter-partner traffic routing soon. So this is kind of the good stuff that I was telling you about, where you can actually tap into the advantages of decentralizing something like this. And for the customers, ideally, if this works well, there should be absolutely no change in your user experience. You should see an increase in reliability. You should see better uptime and less variability, and hopefully we can get to that 100% uptime that everyone's kind of chasing. And for DIN prospects, which could be you, is if this was interesting and you want to talk more about it, you can reach out to us. Me and Chris are going to be here for the rest of the conference, and we can also share like our information later on. And we've got a thank you, and there's a QR code there, and that's basically going to take you to a page where you can get a meeting with our product owner for the Decentralized Infrastructure Network project. And thank you so much.